That drone's gonna hit the Defiant.
Captain, what are your orders?
Full power to forward thrusters. Tell my crew, it's been an honor. The Galactic Alliance, a civilization that had blossomed into a sprawling tapestry of 1,000 worlds, had known peace for countless millennia. This wasn't merely the absence of war, it was a state of profound, calcified tranquility that had slowly, inexorably transformed the very mechanisms designed to maintain it. The Alliance's core, once a vibrant nexus of innovation and dynamic diplomacy, had rigidified into a bureaucratic leviathan, moving with the sluggish, grinding inevitability of ancient, rarely oiled gears. At the heart of its most unyielding policies lay the Core Preservation Edict 7, a decree so old its original purpose was barely remembered, pertaining to the safeguarding of fragile, remote ecosystems. Over the epochs, it had mutated, not through malicious intent, but through sheer, unchallenged adherence, into an absolute prohibition, no contact whatsoever with the Terra system. This wasn't a physical barrier of plasma shields or minefields, but an invisible yet impenetrable wall, meticulously maintained by an unshakable faith in the system's own inherent perfection. The Alliance believed it was infallible, and that conviction, more than any armada, was its strength. Deep within the Alliance's primary data nexus, a holographic projection of swirling cosmic dust and nascent nebulae shimmered. Auditor Alara traced a finger across the star-dusted constellations, her expression a mix of weary frustration and simmering resolve. For cycles, she'd been sifting through the labyrinthine layers of the Core Preservation Edict 7. Her task wasn't to find data corruption or procedural flaws. The system was meticulously clean in its adherence, a digital testament to perfect, if blind, order. No, Alara was searching for something far more insidious, the erosion of purpose. Every convoluted clause, every nested subparagraph, every cross-referenced appendix screamed of a document that had lost its way, a rule whose initial, benevolent intent had been suffocated by layers of self-preservation and bureaucratic inertia. What had begun as a directive to safeguard a remote, ecologically sensitive system had become a paralysis of policy, rendering an entire sentient species invisible. Alara paused, her gaze fixed on a distant, barely perceptible cluster of stars, glowing faintly blue. The Terra system. She accessed the data logs, watching the ghostly representations of countless attempted transmissions from that tiny blue marble. Faint, hopeful signals, broadcasting their presence, their desire for trade, their very existence to a galaxy that stubbornly refused to acknowledge them. And each time, the edict's automated protocols, like an unseen sensor, would either block the signal outright or warp it into incoherent noise. It wasn't mere neglect. It was a systematic, deliberate rejection, cloaked in the sanctity of ancient law. Her discomfort, a low, persistent, thrumming annoyance, had steadily transmuted into a fierce determination to shatter this bureaucratic stranglehold. Not just for the sake of the Terra system, but for the very soul of the Alliance itself, which was slowly, irrevocably decaying from within, its purpose hollowed out by its own rigid perfection. Auditor Alara, your analysis on Subprotocol Delta 7 is pending. A smooth, synthesized voice chimed from her comm panel, pulling her from her reverie. She sighed, tapping the holographic display to acknowledge. Understood, Assistant. Just reviewing historical context. It seems context is often the first casualty of protocol. Across the vast, echoing halls of the Alliance's central archives, Clerk Corin sat hunched over his own data slate, his fingers flying across the interface as he meticulously cross-referenced archival logs. Corin was a quintessential product of the system, forged by its strictures, honed by its precision. He embodied its unwavering belief in procedural integrity. To him, the Core Preservation Edict 7 was merely a law. It was the bedrock of galactic stability. He'd heard whispers of Alara's unorthodox purpose erosion audits, dismissed them as the fanciful musings of a maverick, an irritating anomaly in the otherwise flawless machinery. He saw her as a disruptor, a chaotic element threatening the pristine order. His absolute faith in the inviolability of procedure was his armor, impenetrable to doubt, impervious to any notion of purpose erosion. He adjusted his ocular implant, zooming in on a specific passage on his slate. Interference with Core Preservation Zone 7 to be deemed a Class A violation, punishable by full cessation of resource allocation and diplomatic standing. The clarity, the uncompromising nature of the rule filled him with a quiet satisfaction. This was how order was maintained. This was how peace endured. Any challenge to it was by definition a threat to everything the Alliance stood for.
Meanwhile, light years away, nestled within the familiar embrace of the Sol system, humanity was reaching. Their radio telescopes, their comm arrays, their deep space probes all relentlessly beamed out signals into the void. They were broadcasting their story across the cosmos, their vibrant cultures, their scientific breakthroughs, their yearning for connection. They picked up faint echoes, distant hums, signals radiating across the galaxy that clearly bespoke vast civilizations, intricate networks of communication and trade. Yet every single attempt to reply, every hopeful burst of their own existence was met with a chilling, consistent silence. Their carefully crafted messages, designed to introduce, to invite, to connect, were intercepted and systematically rejected by the automated filters of the Core Preservation Edict 7, either becoming garbled static or simply vanishing into the cosmic background noise. Humanity didn't merely feel ignored, they felt systematically denied, actively barred from a greater community they knew existed. Dr. Orion Vance, a man whose life's work was the very fabric of interstellar communication, stood hunched over a flickering console in the deep bowels of the Terra System's central observatory. His face was etched with a profound weariness, the kind that settled deep in the bones after years of relentless, unyielding effort. He was the pioneer of cosmic communication, and he was tormented by the inability to forge a connection. His screens pulsed with the spectral remnants of countless intercepted galactic broadcasts, beautiful symphonies of data from worlds unknown. He'd spent years painstakingly deciphering the mangled replies his own probes received, the distorted echoes of his civilization's outreach. And what he'd found was not random interference, not technological incompatibility. He'd discovered a pattern. Their signals weren't just being lost, they were being intentionally isolated. His conclusion wasn't of an enemy, but of a wall of power that simply did not want them to participate. "Another one, Doctor," his assistant, a young, earnest prodigy named Lena, reported, her voice hushed, the glow of the console reflecting in her wide, worried eyes. "Reply to the Centauri Prime beacon, filtered, distorted, completely rejected, just like all the others." Orion merely nodded, rubbing his temples. He knew. He always knew. He'd seen the ghost in the machine, the phantom barrier that kept them out. It wasn't malice, he mused, leaning back in his chair, the squeak of the old metal a counterpoint to the high-tech hum of the observatory, but something perhaps even more frustrating, a detached adherence to an ancient, unquestioned law. "Lena," he said, his voice raspy from lack of sleep, "find me every anomaly in the rejection patterns, every single one. There's a lock here, and I intend to find its key." The endless, maddening silence was a wound that festered in humanity's collective psyche. For decades, Orion Vance and his teams had sent their hopeful hails into the void, only for them to crash against an invisible wall, their joyous calls twisted into garbled noise or simply swallowed whole. This wasn't indifference. This was systemic rejection. And humanity, a species that had clawed its way back from the brink of self-destruction to reach for the stars, was not one to accept denial. We have sent our history, our art, our very DNA into the cosmos, Dr. Aris Thorne, a fiery diplomat known for his impassioned speeches, boomed to a hushed global congress. His image was projected onto screens across every continent, every orbital habitat, his face stern, his eyes burning with conviction. We have extended our hand in peace, in friendship, in mutual discovery. And what have we received? Nothing but a digital slammed door. A ripple of discontent, then a rising tide of murmurs swept through the vast, domed hall where the Congress convened. The era of hopeful anticipation for first contact had evaporated, replaced by a simmering, indignant frustration. The dream of a gentle, welcoming galaxy had shattered. We cannot force them to acknowledge us, Thorne continued, his voice dropping to a gravelly growl that nonetheless commanded absolute attention. But we can make it impossible for them to ignore us. That single phrase became the rallying cry. Across Earth and its burgeoning off-world colonies, the shift was palpable, almost physical. The grand debates over the ethics of first contact, once the exclusive purview of academics and philosophers, simply ceased. Now, the question wasn't if contact would happen, but how. And if peace wasn't the currency, then another, more forceful one, would have to suffice. Deep within the cavernous orbital shipyards of Mars, where the red dust of the planet seemed to bleed into the very steel of the nascent fleet, the rhythmic clang of fusion welders became the new heartbeat of humanity. Millions worked in shifts, their faces grim but resolute, their breaths pluming in the cold vacuum of space, the blinding glow of plasma torches reflecting in their determined eyes. Foreman Jian Li, his face streaked with grease and sweat, watched as the colossal skeletal frame of the Arbiter, a dreadnought unlike anything ever conceived by human hands, slowly took shape. Its sheer scale dwarfed the workers, a monument to their collective defiance. "Another hull section integrated, Foreman," a comms voice crackled in his ear. "On schedule for primary shielding installation. We're ahead of projected output for the week." "Good," he grunted, wiping a gloved hand across his brow. He didn't build just weapons. He built statements. Each panel, each conduit, each plasma coil wasn't merely a component in a fighting machine. It was a tangible expression of human will, an ironclad testament to an indomitable resolve. They were building ships not to conquer, but to declare. "We are here. You will see us, and you will acknowledge us."
On Europa, kilometers beneath its icy crust, automated factories hummed with relentless precision, churning out advanced propulsion systems and FTL drives. The once diverse research directives of the scientific community had converged, unified by a singular, overriding objective: recognition. Public sentiment, once a nuanced spectrum of opinions, had distilled into a steely, unified purpose. Town halls, once filled with discussions of environmental policy and resource allocation, now buzzed with fervent reports on material science advancements and fleet production quotas. Children, their faces pressed against viewports, played with crude models of starships, their dreams no longer about being found, but about making themselves known. Admiral Jackson, then merely a fleet captain overseeing logistical deployments, often walked through these shipyards. He moved among the colossal structures, the air thick with the metallic tang of ozone and molten metal, feeling the deep, resonant thrum of the immense engines in his chest. He wasn't a warm man, his features often set in a grim line, but his eyes held a cold, unwavering fire that mirrored the collective anger and pride of his species. He knew precisely what these ships truly represented. They were not monuments to aggression, but to the deep-seated, desperate need to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged as a legitimate, contributing member of the galactic tapestry. The silence had forged them, tempered them, hardening their resolve into something unbreakable. Now they were ready to speak their truth with a voice that could no longer be silenced or distorted. Captain, a young engineer, barely out of the academy, approached Jackson, holding a schematics pad that glowed in the ambient light. The new energy capacitor arrays for the Dauntless. They're exceeding projected outputs by 15%. We can push them further. Jackson simply nodded, a rare, almost imperceptible ghost of a smile touching the corner of his lips. Excellent. Make sure every ship has them. Every single one. He looked out at the vast, glowing expanse of the shipyard, at the thousands of tiny figures diligently working, each a testament to a species united. They were humanity, denied, rejected, but they were also humanity unbowed.
The serene halls of the Galactic Alliance, bathed in the soft glow of simulated starlight, hummed with the quiet efficiency of unchallenged bureaucracy. Life proceeded with the predictable cadence of well-oiled machinery, each cog turning precisely as it had for millennia. This very predictability, however, had fostered a dangerous complacency, a blindness to anything that didn't fit neatly into existing reports or established protocols. Supreme Commander Valerius sat at the head of the High Council chambers, his posture as rigid as the ceremonial staff at his side. Before him, Ilara, meticulously presenting her findings, concluded her impassioned plea regarding the Core Preservation Edict 7. She didn't just highlight the absurdity of the edict, she demonstrated its tangible harm, showing how it stifled potential galactic growth and, more critically, how it had warped the Alliance's own principles of open communication. Valerius listened, his expression unreadable, betraying no sign of immediate dismissal. He didn't outright reject Ilara's concerns. That would be un-alliance-like, disruptive. Instead, he simply redirected the problem, funneling the pressing issue of the edict into a series of protracted research committees. Auditor Ilara, your dedication to detail is commendable, Valerius stated, his voice a smooth, modulated baritone. The concerns you raise are, of course, significant. However, matters of this magnitude require thorough, multi-layered review. I propose we establish a provisional review committee, tasked with a comprehensive reevaluation of the edict's long-term implications. The standard review cycle will apply. Ilara's jaw tightened. Supreme Commander, with all due respect, a standard review cycle for an edict this fundamental could take decades. The situation requires more immediate attention. Valerius merely offered a placid, almost benevolent smile. Time and standard procedure, Auditor. They are the twin pillars of our stability. I have every confidence that this matter will be resolved through diligent process. He genuinely believed that every problem, no matter how complex, would inevitably yield to time and standard procedure. He simply could not conceive of a threat that lay outside the purview of formalized reports and regulatory frameworks. The very idea was an anathema to his structured existence. Meanwhile, far from the polished halls of the capital, along the vast, undefended frontiers of the Alliance, a different kind of problem was beginning to manifest. Fleet Marshal Solon, a grizzled veteran whose career had spanned forgotten skirmishes and meticulous border patrols, began receiving disquieting phenomena reports from his patrol commanders. Entire star systems, once vibrant with Alliance outposts and trading hubs, were simply vanishing without a trace. No distress calls, no wreckage, just an abrupt cessation of all communication. Initially, these incidents were isolated, dismissed by Central Command as sensor glitches or remote stellar anomalies. Solon, however, had seen enough impossible things in the deep void to know better. He pored over the fragmented sensor readings, the distorted echoes of final transmissions. His gut screamed at him that this was no natural phenomenon. He discovered irrefutable evidence of a new predatory threat, a force that devoured systems whole. His emergency reports, filled with chilling detail and urgent warnings, were dispatched to the High Council. But the diplomats and administrators in the capital dismissed them as pessimistic projections, lacking a solid foundation within their established political framework. They filed his reports under unsubstantiated claims and advised him to maintain situational awareness without causing undue panic. Solon found himself increasingly isolated, forced to delve into the terrifying truth of what was truly happening out there, armed with little more than his intuition and the growing stack of ignored data. He sent out his most trusted reconnaissance drones, pushing them further into the expanding void of silence, desperate for concrete answers. Back in the Sol system, oblivious to the unseen, growing cosmic horror, humanity's purpose was singular and focused. The construction of their fleet, christened Operation Dawn, had reached its zenith. Under the unwavering command of Admiral Jackson, a man forged in the crucible of defiance, the colossal armada of 1,000 vessels, from nimble scout frigates to the gargantuan dreadnoughts, finally stood ready. The shipyards, once a furious hive of construction, now buzzed with the final preparations. Fuel cells were topped off, weapon systems were run through exhaustive diagnostics, and crews, sharp-edged and highly trained, took their stations. All systems nominal, Admiral. His executive officer, Commander Lena, Dr. Vance's former assistant, now a decorated fleet officer, reported from the Arbiter's Bridge. The massive view screen displayed the assembled fleet, a dazzling constellation of human might, glittering against the blackness of space. "Excellent, Commander." Jackson's voice was calm, almost devoid of emotion, yet it carried an undeniable weight. "Initiate the preliminary FTL sequence for the lead elements. We commence the deployment trials as planned. Deep space, beyond known Alliance observation vectors." These weren't mere reconnaissance missions. They were secret, meticulously planned maneuvers designed to prepare for a full-scale unveiling, a calculated shock to force the Galactic Alliance to finally pay attention. Jackson harbored no illusions of conquest. He didn't want war, but he believed, with every fiber of his being, that strength was the only language the established galactic community would truly listen to. His conviction wasn't about victory in battle. It was about claiming humanity's rightful place. He understood that only by demonstrating an overwhelming, undeniable presence could Terra ever hope to be heard, to break through the invisible wall that had shackled them for so long. "Are we truly ready for this, Admiral?" Lena asked, her voice softer, a hint of awe and trepidation in it as she looked at the silent, majestic fleet. Jackson turned from the view screen, his gaze piercing. "Ready, Commander? We have been ready since the first signal was sent and rejected. This isn't a show of force for its own sake. This is our declaration. This is our voice. And this time, they will listen." He didn't believe in fighting for the sake of fighting. He believed in fighting for their right to exist, for their very future. He was the spearhead of humanity's resolve, the man who would lead them through every hardship to shatter the silence. Then it happened. Not a gradual creep of isolated skirmishes, but an abrupt,
terrifying explosion of coordinated warfare. The entity Fleet Marshal Solon had dubbed the Maelstrom, now revealed not as a phenomenon, but as a ruthless, aggressive civilization, erupted simultaneously at multiple key Galactic Alliance trade routes. This wasn't a distant threat on the periphery. It was a direct, shattering blow to the Alliance's entrenched complacency, delivered by a highly organized military force whose only aim was conquest and plunder. On the bridge of the Alliance cruiser Vigilant, patrolling the prosperous Nexus 3 trade lane, Captain Ava Rostova watched her tactical display flicker violently. "Massive energy signatures detected," her comms officer shouted, his voice laced with sudden panic. "Hundreds of them, emerging from deep space jump points. They're ships, Captain, unidentified designs." Before Rostova could even respond, alarms blared. The Vigilant's forward view screen, moments ago filled with the tranquil void, was suddenly filled with the sight of alien warships. Their hulls, jagged and dark, were unlike anything catalogued by Alliance intelligence. They moved with a chilling, predatory efficiency, their weapon batteries already glowing with malevolent energy. "They're firing!" a helmsman cried, as streaks of emerald energy lanced through space, obliterating a nearby Alliance transport vessel in a silent, fiery explosion. The Maelstrom fleet wasn't a mere statistical anomaly. It was a disciplined armada, executing a swift, brutal assault designed to cripple and seize. Similar scenes unfolded simultaneously across the galaxy. On the bustling hub world of Xylos Prime, the primary communication relay for the eastern arm of the Alliance, the vibrant data streams cascading across its global networks abruptly flatlined as Maelstrom warships engaged and systematically destroyed the orbital defense platforms. Emergency sirens wailed across the city as the central beacon, a pillar of light that had shone for centuries, was targeted and shattered by concentrated plasma fire. Worlds that had known uninterrupted peace for centuries were plunged into chaos as their local defense fleets, trained primarily for ceremonial duties and internal policing, were overwhelmed in minutes by the Maelstrom's terrifying, utterly alien force. They materialized from nowhere with frightening precision, their fleets sweeping through sectors, pillaging resources, and crippling infrastructure with cold, calculated efficiency. The sheer scale and coordination of the attacks were unprecedented. It wasn't a random raid, but 1,000 simultaneous ruptures, a direct, shattering blow to the Alliance's complacent core. The Alliance's sprawling, complacent bureaucracy, designed for internal stability rather than external aggression, crumbled under the onslaught. Its meticulously structured communication systems, so robust in times of peace, seized up, clogged with a torrent of incoherent distress calls that abruptly ceased as the Maelstrom fleets advanced relentlessly. Command structures, dependent on layers of approval and formalized reports, were paralyzed by the sheer speed and ferocity of the assault. Grand Admiral Theron, usually unflappable, pounded his fist on his holographic tactical map, watching entire sectors turn black as Alliance outposts fell to the unyielding invaders. "What are these ships? Why aren't our long-range arrays responding? Get me Valerius, now!" But the comms simply crackled with static, mirroring the growing terror in the Admiral's eyes.
In the dimly lit, austere command center of Fleet Marshal Solon, far from the polished marble of the capital, the tactical map on the main screen was bleeding red. He had been alone in this fight for so long, his warnings filed away, dismissed as the ravings of a paranoid old soldier. Now, the map was his grim vindication. System after system, marked green just moments ago, winked out, replaced by a deep, unsettling black. He watched, his face a mask of grim satisfaction and profound despair, as the precise, coordinated attack patterns he had predicted with chilling accuracy unfolded before him. "Marshal,
Comms from Sector Gamma 7 are down, and Sector Tau 12 reports their entire defense armada has been neutralized," a young aide stammered, his voice trembling, pointing at the darkening sectors. Solon didn't even turn. "Neutralized," he repeated, his voice raspy. "Not just defeated, obliterated. Just like my reports warned. They are efficient, brutal. They are not here to negotiate, they are here to take." He pointed a trembling finger at the rapidly expanding black zones on the map. "Those aren't just dead signals. That's the Maelstrom. Their fleets. I told them years ago." In the midst of the escalating horror, as what few distress calls got through mutated into static and desperate pleas for reinforcement went unanswered, a frantic search began within the Alliance's central data archives. Amidst the chaos of the High Council, with Supreme Commander Valerius struggling to comprehend the scale of the disaster that had erupted from nowhere, a junior archivist stumbled upon a series of meticulously detailed reports. Marshal Solon's deep space anomaly warnings, his theories on an organized, aggressive civilization on the galactic rim, operating with a vast, unknown fleet. She gasped, her voice barely a whisper, as she raced to present them to the bewildered council. Suddenly, the long-ignored reports of Fleet Marshal Solon were finally frantically unearthed. His persistent, once dismissed warnings, his detailed analyses of the vanishing systems now painted a chillingly accurate picture of the enemy, their nature, their tactics, their sheer destructive power. In the utter chaos that consumed the Alliance's command, with Supreme Commander Valerius struggling to even articulate the nature of the cataclysm that had erupted from nowhere, Solon, with his deep understanding of the frontier and the terrifying new threat, became the sole voice of reason, the only one with a comprehensive, albeit horrifying, understanding of the Maelstrom. But he was an isolated figure, a prophet whose warnings were ridiculed, whose pleas for resources had been ignored. And now, as the galaxy burned around them, he lacked the means to properly counter the unfolding catastrophe. He stood in his command center, watching the tactical map bleed red, a solitary general whose insights were finally validated, but who stood without an army, armed only with the terrible truth no one had wanted to hear, and a growing sense of dread for what was yet to come.
Admiral Jackson stood on the bridge of the Arbiter, his gaze fixed on the tactical display that showed the Vanguard of humanity's 10,000-strong fleet making their final jump. Operation Dawn was in full swing. They were prepared for a dramatic entrance, a show of undeniable force designed to compel the Galactic Alliance to finally see them. Their navigation was guided by independent targeting systems, honed by decades of Orion Vance's meticulous deciphering of Alliance signal remnants and their own advanced astrogation. The goal was to appear decisively, to make their presence undeniable. "Jump coordinates locked for Sector Gamma Prime," Commander Lena reported, her voice steady despite the immense tension. "Calculated arrival 0.05 seconds. Jackson nodded, a grim line set to his jaw. "Activate full spectrum broadcast. Every channel, every known Alliance frequency. They need to hear us this time." He raised a hand, making a slight, almost imperceptible gesture to his bridge crew. The command was given. The Arbiter's bridge shuddered violently. On the main view screen, the familiar streaking tunnel of FTL travel dissolved, replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of open space. But it wasn't the calm, empty void they had anticipated. Instead, they materialized directly at the forefront of a Maelstrom offensive. Plasma fire ripped across the void, emerald lances tearing through the hulls of what were unmistakably Alliance warships. These vessels, though damaged and disoriented, fired back with desperate blue counterpulses. The Maelstrom ships, dark and angular, moved with a horrifying predatory grace, swarming over the beleaguered Alliance line like parasitic insects. The sheer scale of the conflict was staggering, a maelstrom of destruction, real and terrifying.
The sudden, unannounced appearance of 10,000 human warships, perfectly arrayed in battle-ready formations, wasn't a calculated greeting. It was an accidental, yet undeniable announcement of their existence, right in the heart of the Maelstrom's attack. On the Arbiter's main view screen, the tranquil blackness of space was violently replaced by the chaos of a galactic war. A Maelstrom dreadnought, its dark maw glowing, was tearing into an Alliance cruiser just kilometers from the Arbiter's port side. Before the Alliance ship could fully explode, another burst of emerald fire from the Maelstrom, clearly intended for the Alliance ship, ripped dangerously close to the Arbiter's shields. Admiral Jackson, his expression unwavering, turned to Lena. "Transmit the message, now, and target Maelstrom vessels, full defensive fire." His voice was calm, almost conversational, yet it cut through the din on the bridge like a laser. "If they won't see us, they'll feel us." Across the chaotic battlefield, cutting through the static of dying comms and the screams of weapon fire, Admiral Jackson's message was broadcast. It wasn't a threat, not a declaration of war against the Alliance, but a resolute statement that echoed with the accumulated frustration and defiance of centuries. "This is Admiral Jackson of the Terran Fleet. We are humanity. We are here. You can no longer ignore us." The words, though intended as a declaration to the Alliance, were inadvertently also heard by the Maelstrom and every desperate fighting Alliance ship in range. As if on cue, thousands of human plasma cannons, a new vibrant red against the emerald and blue, flared to life, tearing into the Maelstrom's attacking formations.
As humanity's fleet materialized, they didn't just clash with the Maelstrom, they collided with the chaotic, desperate defensive forces of the Galactic Alliance. The Alliance ships, already reeling from the Maelstrom's onslaught, suddenly found themselves staring down a new, impossibly large fleet whose origins were unknown and whose weaponry, though targeting the Maelstrom, looked disturbingly powerful. What erupted was a three-way chaotic battle. The Maelstrom savagely attacked both the newly arrived Terran fleet and the reeling Alliance forces. The Alliance tried desperately to fend off the Maelstrom, but also fired upon the Terran fleet as an unidentified, heavily armed hostile. And the Terran fleet, caught in the crossfire, engaged both to defend itself and push through the unfolding battle. Tracer fire crisscrossed the void in a terrifying dance of green, blue, and red. Alien energy blasts ripped through hulls, and the sheer volume of ships twisting and turning in a desperate struggle created a terrifying, claustrophobic melee. In the command center of Fleet Marshal Solon, the tactical map, already a bleeding canvas of red Maelstrom advances, suddenly exploded with a new set of contacts. "Unidentified armada, sir! 10,000 vessels, materializing right on the Maelstrom's flank in Sector Prime," his aide shouted, pointing with a trembling finger at the swirling tactical display. "Are they Maelstrom reinforcements?" Solon barked, his face pale, imagining an even greater nightmare. "No, sir. Their energy signatures are different. They're engaging the Maelstrom, but Alliance forces are firing on them too. It's a three-way engagement, Marshal." Just as Solon was grappling with this impossible development, a faint, clear signal cut through the cacophony of battle, overriding the Alliance's own struggling comms. It was a voice, speaking a language both alien and strangely familiar. "We are humanity. We are here. You can no longer ignore us." Solon's eyes widened. Humanity? The Core Preservation Zone 7? It couldn't be. The very name sent a chill down his spine. A light year away, in the heart of the Arbiter's comms bay, Dr. Orion Vance was frantically sifting through the torrent of battlefield communications. Amid the screams of dying ships and the static of weapons discharges, he began picking up new frequencies, transmissions from the Galactic Alliance. They were panicked, disbelieving, and, to his horror, labeling humanity as a new, unexpected hostile. Simultaneously, far away in the Alliance's primary data nexus, Auditor Ilara, hunched over a flickering console, had been desperately trying to override the Core Preservation Edict 7, its automated blockades. She was attempting to establish any form of galaxy-wide communication amid the Maelstrom attack, trying to pull coherence from chaos.
as she bypassed the last crumbling layers of the edict that were finally failing under the strain of the crisis, she inadvertently intercepted Orion Vance's transmission. His unique coded signature, embedded in humanity's FTL comms, bypassed the final, desperate filters she was actively dismantling. In a breathtaking moment of simultaneous revelation, both Orion and Ilara, from their vastly different positions across the stars, pieced together the entire horrifying story. The Core Preservation Edict 7 hadn't just preserved the Terra system, it had systematically blocked all communication, twisting peaceful hails into indecipherable noise. This deliberate, albeit automated isolation had led directly to humanity's development of an immense, powerful fleet, designed not for aggression, but to force recognition. The entire tragedy wasn't born of malice from either side, but from the rigid inflexibility of an outdated procedure and a catastrophic lack of communication. The invisible wall was real, and it had pushed two civilizations towards the brink of war, even as a greater, common enemy bore down on them all. Ilara's console flashed with Orion Vance's deciphered data, revealing the full extent of humanity's long-standing attempts at contact and the edict's automated, systematic rejections. The cold, hard data resonated with Orion's own years of frustrated research. The edict! It wasn't just a barrier, it was a filter. It actively distorted our signals. It turned our cries for peace into static, Orion shouted, a mix of horror and understanding in his voice, his fists clenching. At the exact same instant, Ilara, seeing Orion's incoming signal, watched as the edict's layers of archaic code revealed their true insidious function on her screen. She saw the lines of script designed not to protect, but to isolate, to conceal. It wasn't a malfunction. It was designed to isolate, to prevent contact. My gods, what have we done? She whispered, her voice filled with dawning horror.
The Maelstrom's relentless advance continued, pushing the Alliance to the breaking point. In the High Council chamber, Supreme Commander Valerius, his face ashen and slick with sweat, stared at the collapsing tactical map. Alliance defense lines were buckling, entire sectors reporting complete loss. "We are being overrun. We need more forces. Where are our reserve fleets? Why are our comms still failing?" It was then that the junior archivist, trembling but resolute, burst into the chamber. Solon's unearthed reports, now cross-referenced with Ilara's breakthrough beta, clutched in her hands. She thrust them directly into Valerius's trembling hands. "Supreme Commander, Marshal Solon's analysis, and this new data from Auditory Lara, it explains everything. The unidentified fleet, they're from Terra. They've been trying to contact us for centuries." In that critical moment, with the Maelstrom overwhelming Alliance defenses and the terrifying truth laid bare, Fleet Marshal Solon, the only one who truly understood the threat and the newly revealed truth, seized his opportunity. He stepped forward, his eyes burning with a desperate urgency. "Valerius, the edict, it created this. Give me command, now." Valerius, utterly broken by the unfolding disaster and overwhelmed by the magnitude of the truth, offered no resistance. He simply slumped back, a defeated man. Solon, his face grim but resolute, took control. "Get me the Terran fleet on a secure channel, immediately. Prioritize all available power to establishing a direct link." His commands were sharp, precise, cutting through the panic and indecision that had plagued the Alliance. "This is Fleet Marshal Solon to Admiral Jackson of the Terran Fleet. We have been blind. The edict, it was a lie. We are under attack by the Maelstrom. We need your help. We need humanity's help." He quickly established an emergency communication channel with Jackson, the words tumbling out as he transmitted the entire terrible truth about the Maelstrom, their tactics, their overwhelming numbers. The truth, finally, had been laid bare, not through diplomacy, but through sheer, desperate necessity. The chasm of misunderstanding that had separated humanity and the Galactic Alliance for millennia had been brutally ripped open by the Maelstrom. Now, amidst the firestorm of galactic war, a fragile,
desperate alliance began to forge itself, not from trust, but from the raw, undeniable truth and the desperate need for survival. "Admiral Jackson, do you copy?" Fleet Marshal Solin's voice, raspy but clear, sliced through the comm static on the Arbiter's bridge. "We are sending you the Maelstrom's tactical profiles and weakness analysis now. It's crude, but it's all we have. Our forces are spread thin. Your fleet, you're directly in their main assault path." Jackson's eyes, fixed on the chaotic view screen, showed no flicker of hesitation. "Understood, Marshal. We're engaging. Commander Lena, push the lines. Captain Cassian, I want your division on the Maelstrom's right flank. Exploit their energy dissipation signature. Hit them hard." The battle raged with a ferocity unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human ships, with their stark, brutal efficiency, plunged headlong into the Maelstrom formations. Alliance dreadnoughts, once pristine and methodical, were now forced to adapt, their precise, conservative tactics clashing and then merging with humanity's raw, often self-sacrificing approach. "Sir, the Maelstrom capital ship Leviathan is deploying a shield-buster drone directly towards Alliance command ship Defiant," a Terran tactical officer shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. The Defiant was Solin's flagship. Alliance forces, already stretched thin, couldn't divert. Captain Cassian, a pilot commander of a Terran Judy Jen capital ship leading the Vanguard, saw the threat. His own vessel, the Vanguard, had already taken heavy damage, its shields flickering precariously. He had a choice: hold position and try to divert the drone with long-range fire, or commit to a desperate, suicidal maneuver. "Ramming trajectory confirmed," Cassian's voice echoed through his comms, calm and resolute, even as alarms screamed in his cockpit. "Full power to forward thrusters. Tell my crew, it's been an honor." The Vanguard, a symbol of humanity's stubborn refusal to yield, pivoted sharply. It wasn't a calculated maneuver for minimal loss. It was a desperate all-or-nothing charge. The Vanguard slammed into the Maelstrom shield-buster drone with catastrophic force, detonating in a blinding flash of light that consumed both vessels. The Defiant was saved. The sacrifice of Captain Cassian and the many others like him was not just a heroic act, it was unmistakable, undeniable proof of a devastatingly effective warfare philosophy that relied on audacious risks and absolute commitment. Alliance officers, watching the tactical feeds, saw Terran vessels break formation, charging into impossible odds, often to their own destruction, but always to inflict maximum damage on the Maelstrom. It shook the very foundations of the Galactic Alliance's perception of warfare, their rigid adherence to preservation and precision. They witnessed a species that fought not just to win, but to survive at any cost, a ferocity they had long forgotten. "Valerius, look," Solin whispered, his gaze fixed on the tactical map as another Terran destroyer deliberately detonated in the heart of a Maelstrom formation, creating a ripple of devastating chain reactions. "They fight with a different kind of courage." In the aftermath of the initial brutal Maelstrom assault, the galaxy breathed a collective, ragged sigh of relief. The immediate threat had been pushed back, thanks in no small part to humanity's unforeseen, ferocious intervention. But the silence that followed the battle was filled with uncomfortable truths. The discovery of the Core Preservation Edict 7's true function, coupled with the desperate, raw cooperation in battle, ignited a thorough reconstruction of the Galactic Alliance's bureaucratic apparatus. The old ways, the layers of unquestioned protocol and blind adherence were seen for the deadly complacency they truly were. Committees were dissolved, not formed. Data streams were opened, not closed. The focus shifted from rigid adherence to flexibility and genuine proactive communication. Alara, now hailed as a visionary, found herself at the forefront of these sweeping reforms.
She moved through the Alliance's central data networks, her fingers flying across consoles, tearing down the digital walls she had once struggled against. She was no longer just an auditor, she was an architect of change, leading the charge to dismantle the very system that had almost doomed them all. The edict must be purged from all active protocols, Alara declared, to a stunned council of elders, her voice firm. Not modified, not archived, purged. Its very existence is a threat. Humanity, having forced its way onto the galactic stage, didn't just join the Alliance, it immediately became a pivotal force in the ongoing war against the Maelstrom. Their direct, aggressive methodologies, their capacity for rapid adaptation, and their sheer, unyielding spirit of defiance brought a new method and fighting spirit to the galaxy. They didn't just bolster the Alliance's numbers, they fundamentally reshaped its combat doctrine. Terran officers were integrated into Alliance command structures, their insights, though jarring at first, proving invaluable against the Maelstrom's relentless advance. The Galactic Alliance learned a devastating, vital lesson. False security found in rigid rules can lead to real destruction. Their millennia of peace, built on unquestioning adherence, had nearly been their undoing. They saw that true strength lay not in static perfection, but in adaptability, in challenging assumptions. Humanity, on the other hand, learned an equally profound lesson. Not every barrier is born of malice. Sometimes it is merely the rigidity of a system that needs to be broken. They understood that the Alliance's rejection was not personal hatred, but the consequence of a broken, self-serving mechanism. Auditor Alara, empowered and relentless, led the internal reforms, stripping away layers of bureaucratic deadwood. Clerk Corrin, once the epitome of procedural adherence, found himself unexpectedly becoming an expert in deciphering old regulations, helping to meticulously unravel the very laws he had once blindly defended, ironically becoming a valuable asset in the deconstruction of the old system. Dr. Orion Vance, his years of frustrated research finally vindicated, became the central bridge for interspecies communication, his expertise now vital for fostering genuine understanding. And Admiral Jackson, the uncompromising leader of humanity's defiant entrance, became a unified fleet commander, his tactical prowess and unwavering will now guiding the combined might of both civilizations against their common enemy. The story concluded with the arrival of the Terran diplomatic delegation at the Galactic Alliance capital. They were not merely given seats at the council table, their presence tolerated. Instead, they were welcomed with a profound, hard-earned mutual understanding. The grand chambers buzzed not with the cautious, formal greetings of strangers, but the earnest, sometimes awkward exchanges of newfound allies who had faced death together. There was a deeper respect, a raw appreciation forged in the fires of battle and revealed truth. It was a potent reminder that sometimes the greatest barriers are not external enemies, but the self-imposed rules that blind us, and that from the most profound misunderstandings can arise the strongest, most enduring alliances.